No sense of any problems here. There have been pockets of Biden supporters, Black Lives Matter supporters. There have been some arguments here and there along Pennsylvania Avenue. This is Tom Bowman as the Supreme Court. Supporters cheered as Trump's motorcade drove by the rallies, many taking pictures as the president headed to his golf club in Virginia. Almost none of the protesters were wearing masks or practicing social distancing. In Georgia, ballots are
Hey, if everyone could mute their computers, please. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the book launch of I Wish I Was Ray Johnson, but I Can't Be Because He's Dead by Emily Dunn. As you might know, we've been focusing quite a lot on mail art at Print and Matter St. Mark's. As when we closed the store back in March, my colleague Emmett and I sat down an afternoon and tried to figure out what we could do and what we could mean with the bookstore being closed and how we could reach our audience and do something meaningful in those months. And we actually quite quickly came to the idea of having a call for mail art. We came up with the prompt, we live in real time, spread the word on social media and on Instagram and email. And within 6 weeks, we had over 700 email submissions, over 600 physical pieces of mail art that were sent to us each to our own addresses. Because the bookstore was closed, we put our own address on there, and it felt like Christmas every day. It really was one of the most fun projects I've ever worked on. And so, yeah, when Emily reached out to us a few months ago with this book project and the idea of having a launch and having a discussion about mail art, it just seemed like the perfect theme and time to do this. Yeah, the book is here, of course. It's at Printed Matter St. Mark's in the store, in Chelsea too, and online. We'll send the link in the chat if you want to purchase it. And I thought I'd just show the submissions I actually received from Emily and Aaron back during the call for mail art. I have this one from Aaron, which is, if you can see it, it says Treasures from the National Gallery of Art. And then we got this one too, which clearly was sent back by the USPS and then sent again, I think in an envelope, if I'm correct. And then we got this one from Emily, the Queen's Correspondence School did not die. And it opens up and we go. Yeah, so I think I don't want to take more of the time. There will be a lot of talk about mail art. Just a few little notes for all the participants. Please stay muted. We welcome questions, lots of questions. Please send them in the chat and I'll be forwarding them to Emily and then she can include them probably more in the discussion moment at the end. And I suggest to watch the event in speaker view, which you can do in the top right. So you'll always only see the person who's speaking. And yeah, I think that's all on my end. I think I'll just leave the floor to you, Emily, Aaron, and Diana. Thank you.
Great. So just off the bat, I want to thank all of you guys for coming. I also should thank the Queen's Council on the Arts, who made the printing of this book possible. So thank you, Jenna London and Daniel Bamba. I also want to thank you guys at Printed Matter for being so willing to work with us. Can everyone hear me? Cool. I want to thank Emmett and Joanna, as well as Margaret. I also want to thank my co-hosts, Aaron Crouch and Diana Bowers, and all of the people along the way, including my collaborators and advisors who helped me make this book. So just a short list, I won't take too long, but Robert Hirschhorn, Deirdre, B. Donahue, Matthew Carson, Liz Sales, Chaska Gerardo, Caleb Mackenzie Margulies, Erica Murillo, and my late friend Bernard Joanna Lewis. Sorry, a little nervous. Also, of course, thank you to the USPS and Ray Johnson. And yeah, thank you all for coming. We're going to talk about my book today, which is basically a book about the ghost of Ray Johnson haunting me in my attempt to embody him through mail art and kind of trolling the post office. But I'm going to hand it off to Aaron and Diana to introduce themselves shortly, and they will each give a small presentation before I show you the book.
Hi, I'll jump in. I'm Diana Bowers-Smith, and I was the archivist for the Ray Johnson estate for several years. I also went to the same library school as Emily, so that's how we know each other. We're both archivists. And I'm currently the archivist one of the archivists at the Center for Brooklyn History, which is a new entity at Brooklyn Public Library combining the Brooklyn Historical Society and the library's Brooklyn collection. And I'm really happy to be here. Aaron?
Aaron, you are muted. Aaron, you're muted.
You have no idea how important what I was just saying was. I was being so well behaved, too well behaved. So I'm Aaron. Thank you, Emily, for having me. I'm an artist and a teacher, and I make a ton of mail art, and Printed Matter showed you a couple of the pieces that I sent to them. And I have some more to show you later and some other things to talk about. I met Emily, I think, by cold mailing her some mail art. I don't think we had ever met in person until we had had a USPS relationship, or maybe a book fair relationship.
We met at Chris Clary's event.
Who is in the book, actually. Yeah, so it's always 1 degree of one postage stamp away tonight. Yeah, so thank you for having me.
Awesome. So Diana, do you want to give your presentation first?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so hi again, everyone. Ostensibly, I'm here to provide some background for this project, to tell you a bit about Ray Johnson and the history of mail art, and kind of place this project in context. But in the spirit of the project and Ray's work, I'm going to be a little bit looser here than your typical art history talk. So instead of slides, I have a bunch of my Ray Johnson books right here next to me. I'm going to hold them up sometimes to illustrate some of my points. After all, the first line of Emily's book is "Artists make terrible historians." And certainly Ray Johnson himself had little interest in historicizing himself or his work in traditional ways. As we can see in this piece, no chronology, very definitive there. So the title of my essay in this book is "Ray Johnson Did Not Die," but he did, we think. In fact, his death is for some one of the most fascinating things about him. Ray Johnson committed suicide by jumping off a bridge and apparently backstroking out to sea, which he did during a frigid New York January. And actually it was January 13th, and he was 67 years old. 6 + 7 = 13. He had also stayed in a motel room numbered 247, 2 + 4 + 7 also equals 13. So due to these seemingly deliberate and symbolic choices, some refer to or consider Johnson's suicide as his final performance. And this piece was made a few months before his death. Due to Johnson's cult-like following, the location of his remains is a closely guarded secret. And though I was the archivist for his estate for several years, I'm not privy to that secret. As Emily writes in her book, even in death, he is expert in covering his tracks. And as I write in my essay, he continues to exert his influence over us, yet prevents us from knowing him fully. Those of us who have been pulled into Ray's orbit know well the feeling of being haunted by him. I want to show you this image of Ray, which I've just seen so many times. And there's a little mail art thought. And again, that image shows up in this very ghost-like collage. I even have Ray emblazoned on my body. This is my Ray Johnson tattoo. It's a horseshoe crab, and you can see the same horseshoe crab in my Ray Johnson collage behind me on the wall. Ray used the horseshoe crab image often in his work in later years, after presumably seeing these creatures on the shores of the Long Island Sound when he moved to Locust Valley on the North Shore of Long Island. My mother grew up in Locust Valley, and I spent my childhood summers on those self-same beaches, maybe even delighting in those self-same horseshoe crabs. Ray might have seen me, I might have seen him. I was in his spaces before I ever knew his name. But Emily Dunn experienced a Ray Johnson haunting on another level when she started receiving junk mail addressed to him at her address in Queens, which is also the home of her Queens Correspondence School, inspired by Johnson's own New York Correspondence School. Ray Johnson once referred to himself as a mysterious and secret organization. As the nexus of a large international mail art network, he came to embody that network, and through it, he lives on. Even though, as Emily writes about in her book, he declared in 1973 that the New York Correspondence School had died. And let me show you a piece related to that. The New York Correspondence School did not die, and neither did the Queen's Correspondence School, as this piece in the book declares. I quoted Emily earlier as saying that artists make terrible historians, and I think many might also say that artists make terrible archivists, Emily being an exception, of course. Working as the archivist for Ray Johnson's estate was often an exercise in letting go. The estate archive consisted of the entire contents of Ray's house when he died, and the nature of it in many ways resisted archival practice. Items that would be thrown away in most other archival collections are important, sometimes integral markers of Ray's practice and modes of thinking. My favorite example of this was a hardware store circular of which he had many, many copies, and duplicates are also often discarded in traditional archival collections. The flyer had drawings of items sold at the hardware store, and it had been printed in several different colors. I didn't recognize the significance of it at first, but then I saw that one of the images was a bucket, and I had seen that bucket many times in Ray's work, like in this piece. Ray used this bucket over and over again. Like many of his repeated images, we can't know for sure what meaning it held for him. But one compelling theory has to do with his fascination with Taoist philosophy, which holds that a state of placid emptiness is akin to enlightenment. That's a lot of meaning for a hardware circular. But that was typical for Ray. As his biography on the estate website notes, he was an artistic alchemist who transformed the detritus of everyday life. Ray was a collector, and so is Emily Dunn. Let me show you a few examples of this. Here's a collage in which he incorporated green zip ties. So those green zip ties, but what's the word? They're wire and they have paper over them and you can fold them around. And here is one with false eyelashes. So you can see the eyelashes right here. Again, these items would not normally find a place in an archive. In fact, I had a coworker at the estate who was very squeamish about human hair, but unfortunately, coming across it in the collection was not an uncommon occurrence, along with dead bugs and even condoms. But in the context of Ray Johnson's work, this so-called detritus of ordinary life takes on new meaning. Much like everyday objects do for Emily, who, as she notes in her bio, quote, returns life to lost items and found photographs by creating collages or objects that embrace their mysterious pasts. In fact, she once found a photograph of me in a junk shop in Williamsburg. So how's that for a mysterious past? For those familiar with Emily's work, I wanted to show this collage of Ray's since it really reminds me of the kind of work that she does. And I also wanted to read some of the words of Bill Wilson, Ray Johnson's friend and a scholar of his work. And these words were selected by editor and poet Elizabeth Zuba to appear alongside this collage in her recent book about the interplay of Ray's work and Bill's words, Frog Pond Splash. Ray took a piece from the whole and showed something else existed in that piece besides what had been obvious when it was part of a whole. Anything that attracted his attention could be itself, but also it could be used to point to something besides itself. Hence, in a sense, it was freed from the seriousness of its selfhood. And would that we could all be freed from the seriousness of our selfhood. So to return to the bucket from the hardware circular, as I said, it appeared again and again in Ray's work. And indeed, repetition is one of the key pillars of his practice. Iteration and reiteration of images, words, concepts, gestures. For example, here is a selection of works in which he played with the Lucky Strike logo. Let me find the right page. So you can see lots of different pieces with the same motif. And in this piece that I'm about to show you, he took the shape of Duchamp's ampoule of Paris air and repeated it again and again and again, letting it deteriorate a little bit each time until it was practically unrecognizable. And in this piece, he uses a rubber stamp, which is a common trope in mail art and in Emily Dunn's practice as well, to repeat down the side of the piece over and over, collage by Joseph Cornell. And of course, one of the foundational practices of mail art is the idea of please add to and return, which is at the heart of Emily's collaborative practice as well, showcased in the first section of this book. As Emily notes, there is a fan club element to Ray's practice. And as she says, I think aptly, it's funny too, these things happen so organically, and the lines of things really begin to blur between strangers, fans, and friends. She also used the word organic when we were discussing and planning for this event, noting that the work in this book ultimately came about because of her work as an archivist. But she also said that part of the genesis of the work was trying to get in trouble, or as Aaron Cratch put it, trying to intervene in the world. Anyone who knows Ray Johnson's work in life will know that that is a message and a goal that he would absolutely support, even though, or perhaps especially because, Emily may have committed, in her words, light mail fraud when she wrote to the New York State Department of Health pretending to be Ray's child in an effort to get a copy of his death certificate. If Ray Johnson is, as so many have said over and over again, the father of mail art, perhaps we should refer to Emily Dunn as the daughter of mail art. Thanks.
Thank you, Diana. That was really amazing to get to see all of that stuff, and I want to have your job in his archive for a while. I think I'm here today to sort of represent maybe a stepchild of Ray Johnson. If Emily's the daughter, I may be the stepson. My work is not even as neat or organized as Ray's, but I was trying to explain to a friend what I was going to talk about today and why I was on this panel. And all I could think of was, well, Ray Johnson is like Duchamp for me, but Duchamp is for other artists. He's sort of like the godfather that you can't not be influenced by and not want to be or wish you had been, but also want to kill in some sort of Freudian way. And so I suppose I'm lucky at this point in my life that I've made peace with those demons and tried to enjoy them. So what I wanted to show you today was a couple of pieces that have come into my life or are in the process of going out of my life. And then I'm going to show you a short clip from a video that I made of my studio for Printed Matter when they did that exhibition. So one of the things that I love about mail art the most is that absolutely anything can be sent. And so while we were looking at the examples of Ray, I kept jumping up. I'm sorry if that was annoying, because I kept thinking of things I wanted to show, like these two really sort of very creepy rubber fish. They're lures. And they came from a friend of mine who was riding out the COVID quarantine in Spain. And they took a long time to get here, but they arrived, no problem. And I keep this one because it also amazes me that it arrived safely. It's a beautiful piece of fun fur with just my address and stamps directly on it. And this person, I know who it is, but they refused to put their return address on it. They like the secrecy of it, which I appreciate. There's always a bit of risk involved when you drop it in the mail, and I find that completely liberating. It allows me to operate outside of any gallery system or art system. Here's another one that came very recently. Sometimes I don't open them. I don't know if you can tell, but it's a very large plastic bag with some doll house pieces sort of from a Lego, but I was just so impressed by the extraordinary size of this that I had to keep it. And one thing I wish I had is my really good friend, Margaret Rizzio, who I make a book called Installments with, and we ship it back and forth in the mail to create it. She once sent me a piece of toast, and I don't have it anymore, but I swear to you, the post office delivered it. She toasted it, she coated it in glue, and she put like white paint on as like butter and wrote my address in it. And the post office broke it and delivered it in one of those "we're sorry" bags. And I have no idea what happened to it during a move, but that would be like my other fifth greatest hit. And then right now, I'm in the middle of an obsession with these golden books that you probably had as a kid. You can get them for extremely cheap, and they have really nice cardboard, and I'm ripping all the pages out of them and making collages inside of them, or sometimes on both sides. And then, as you might have seen earlier, I like to put the stamps right on top. So I'm very good friends with my postal service salesperson, probably because I go the most often and just spend money, which is great. I love them. And the other thing I wanted to mention before I show the video is just how many artists that I grew up knowing about that used mail art, whether it was Boetti and Boetti, or Genesis Breyer Peorage, or Ray Johnson, or Gilbert and George, or Donald Evans, who actually came to me later, thanks to the advice of a friend who I see here with us tonight. There were just so many that I saw, and I remember being a young artist and thinking, that's what I want to do as part of whatever other practice I have. So with that said, I'm going to try to play you just a couple of minutes of this video. So let's hope this works like a charm.
So what are you looking at? You're looking at magazines, books, fun fur, glue, glue stick, white glue, masking tape, flare pens, a book about Africa from elementary school, Philip Taft postcards from Luring Augustine, an old art history book, a decorating book from Better Homes and Gardens, some quote unquote Mexican lottery tickets, some Sesame Street stamps. Well, actually not the stamps, but the stickers that were left over after you use all the stamps, X-Acto knife, mail as art with a capital A. I don't really remember the first time I learned about it as an art form. I always liked getting mail, and I assumed other people did too. So I started sending extra postcards when on vacation with my family. And then I started sending postcards from home when I wasn't on vacation, just to send postcards. Eventually, probably high school art history or maybe undergrad, I learned about Ray Johnson and Yoko Ono and George Masiunas. Of course, they became my idols, my Fluxus idols, because mail art was cheap, easy, and inexpensive to distribute. I call it little d democratic because potentially everyone or anyone could participate. And most importantly, no judgments. No critics or dealers involved. I could control the artwork from creation to reception.
That seems like a very good point.
I
to
think
stop sharing.
me here in the studio being able to put things together and send it off into space.
There we go. All right. Back to you, Emily. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Those were both such great presentations, and you teed me up for a lot of what I was going to say. So perfect. So yeah, I'm here in my studio. my printer's making some noise. He wants to say hello. And I'm going to show you some stuff as well, including the book. Some of you may have it with you at home. Shush. Okay, so one thing I wanted to discuss before I start showing a slideshow of the book, because it would be a little awkward for me to sort of sit here like, here's a page, here's a page. But I wanted to point out the importance of the front cover and the back cover. It's not a pretty looking book, I admit that, and that's fine. But when I was searching around on Google, well, I was searching around on the census website to try and find Ray Johnson's home address where he was born in Michigan, and I found it. And I searched for it on Google Street View, and this is what I saw. His childhood home is a nothing. There's nothing there. And I thought that that was really fitting with the project and very Johnsonian of him to have his childhood home be the only house on the block that's a nothing. And I also really love this circle here, the sun blowing out. And so that's the front of the book. The title of the book actually starts on the back. So you can see I wish I was Ray Johnson, but I can't be because he's dead. The back cover of the book is the bridge on Sag Harbor where we think he jumped into the water and sort of swam away. So I liked sort of having this beginning and end, but there's also something really haunting on the Google Street View is that you see this little, what looks to me like a figure. Obviously we know it's the little antenna of the Google Street View car, but I just really liked the way it looked to have this sort of ghost present on this Google Street View. So what's the story? As Diana said, I don't like to historicize myself, and I often play with and mix up the dates that I founded the Queen's Correspondence School. Sometimes I say it's 2008, sometimes I say it's 2012. I think with my work as an archivist, I sort of see how malleable you can be with facts. I started making collages as my main form of art in 2008. And then in 2012 is when I saw the documentary How to Draw a Bunny and got completely enthralled with Ray and his work and started my own version of his school. So that being said, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to look inside the book for a little bit. Great. Can we see? We're good? Okay. So here's the first page. It'll make more sense later, but this is one of the successful phishing attempts that I got of getting mail sent to my house with Ray Johnson's name on it. One of the funny things about it is it's the wrong address a little bit. They say that I live in Unit 26, which is not true. So I also sort of loved the chaos that comes with mail art. All right. So here we have, I was told to explain for us non-librarian folks, the colophon with all my thank yous and the title page here, where we see the logo. Oh, you can't see me, I'm putting in air quotes. The logo of the Queen's Correspondence School, established in 2012. So the images in the beginning of the book, oh, here's, sorry. So this is my introduction to who I am, which I think Diana covered much better than I could have. A lot of my work also has to do with stealing or taking things, including the concept of Ray Johnson's practice. I I started collecting and taking stamps when I worked in this awful blue chip gallery in Midtown. And one day they sent me up to the archives, as they called it, but it was just a storage room. And I found all these beautiful stamps that said, you know, return, media mail, return. I found a really great label maker. And so I asked my direct supervisor, can I take all of these things to use in my artwork? And she said, yes, that's fine. But anyway, then once I started really getting interested in mail art with my friends, anonymous people, people that I'm a fan of, like when I started sending things to Aaron, I send things to musicians that I like. I then really started to get really invigorated by the things that people would send me back. One very enthusiastic friend who I was explaining what mail art was, one day I received in the mail a package full of 25 Pantone paint chips in this color called Circus Peanut, with her instructing me, you must make me a collage, but only with these Circus Peanut paint chips. Something I received recently was a 20-page typewritten letter saying to never contact the addressee's wife again. So it's a mixed bag when, as Aaron said, you drop something in the mail and it sort of has this magic to it. On the right-hand side here, we just have some examples of mail that I've been sent, or just small collages that are playing with text and the Queen's Correspondence School and Did Not Die. But here we get into some of the meat of the collages that I chose to be in the book. Both of these images came from when I had an exhibition at a gallery called Academic Gallery that was founded by Melissa Walker. That is also in Queens. So what Melissa and I did was we had an open call to the gallery where people from all around the world would send images to start, and then Melissa and I would either distribute, or I selfishly, if I liked and saw potential for collaboration, would myself collaborate. At the end of the show, we ended up having, in a fairly large space, basically floor to ceiling collages. So that was a really exciting and intense introduction to just getting things in the mail with other people, sending things to other people, but also through my work as a librarian, I was meeting lots of artists who wanted to show me or my colleagues their books. So this is a collage that I did with an artist who I really admire. Her name's Elizabeth Tonard. Actually, that's wrong. I sent this collage to American Wessels, and we had a dance where the collage kept getting returned to her in Amsterdam and wouldn't make its way to Queens in time to make it into the book. So this is actually only one side of our collage. This is a work with Elizabeth Tonard that I made, but I also would make things with friends. This is a piece that my friend Matthew and I worked on, and it sort of opens up like a little triptych. There are also pieces that never were returned. I sent this piece to, I don't remember who, and I only have the scan of it. So there is this sort of feeling of letting go when you do send one of your collages. And I think something I appreciate a lot about mail art is how it's not precious. Yeah, of course, everyone's artwork is beautiful, but I really appreciate the ephemeral aspects of popping something in the mail. This is one example where I do show you the before and after. I wanted to illustrate how transformative work can become when you start collaborating with someone. It's so subtle that I don't think people maybe even notice that the collage that I sent in the baggie on the right ended up as this collage on the left, which was improved by an artist called Kenneth Moore. So as I mentioned, I like the concept of the fan club. Diana mentioned that Ray Johnson, would start these fan clubs. And I actually read recently that that obsession or thinking about celebrity culture that Ray was practicing really influenced Andy Warhol. So I like that idea too, that sort of Ray Johnson in his own way inspired one of the most widely recognized artists of this century or last century. And he is still widely unknown. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. So taking on this idea of fan clubs, I was obsessed with this band, the Voidoids, and this musician, Richard Hell, who's still alive. He writes poetry now. But I noticed on his website that he still does mail order for his merch. So I saw this P.O. box and I said to myself, oh, what the hell? I'm just going to send Richard Hell a collage and a letter explaining I have this exhibition at this gallery in Queens. I would love to have you collaborate with me on a collage. So this is both the back and the front. I put the back to brag in a way that Richard Hell put a little heart around my name. So I was very excited about that. Richard put the bubble gum on top. So another place that I found a lot of people to work with, there's a database slash, it's not necessarily a social media. I don't like Facebook at all, but I suppose this is sort of like Facebook, but it's a group of mail artists who can contact each other on the website and get addresses to make work with. So these are two collages. The one on the left is, I met an artist, Cosmo Vinyl, on this website. The website, if you're interested, it's International Union of Mail Artists. So it's the IUOMA. And it's a wonderful resource. Of course, everything is hit or miss, but I've met some really incredible artists there as well. So I'm just gonna sort of try and slowly go through some of the rest of the work. But that's the first season of the book. I was calling them chapters, but I also kind of liked the idea of thinking of them as seasons because they are temporal. This is the background. This is the work that I was making while I was developing this practice of mail art and sort of trying to get clout for the Queen's Correspondence School. As Diana said, I like to include text that references our sort of correspondence school. But once we get into the next season or chapter, this is where I really got the impetus that I wanted to do a project about wanting to become Ray Johnson. So I'm just gonna get to the end here. This is the stamp that I mentioned that I stole from the Blue Chip Gallery, the please return photo after use. I still have it. I think a lot of mail artists also like to reference or use things from the post office in their work, which I'll briefly tell you an anecdote that the other day while I was at the post office mailing off some of your books, I had been using the priority mail sticker to put my return address stamp, and the post office said, no, you can't do that. I'm going to put all these blank stickers and you have to go handwrite your address for these 30 books I was shipping. So I sort of angrily told my boyfriend, like, oh, I'm getting trolled by the post office. And he said, you deserve it. It's all you do. So I thought that was a nice little bit of karma. So this is the beginning of the next season of the book. I think Diana condensed all of this really well. It gives some background about Johnson's history, where he was born, when he went to Black Mountain College, moved to New York, was in quick sequence, his friend Andy Warhol was shot and he was mugged. So Johnson moved to Long Island, where he became increasingly isolated, which is interesting in these times, from the New York art scene in person, but he continued to engage with the Fluxus movement from his home in Long Island. So as Diana showed you, around 1973, he also plays with this date as well. On June 5th, he says the Queen's Correspondence School did not die, but then on April 5th, 1973, he submitted a death notice to the New York Times obituary section saying that the New York Correspondence School did die. And then I sort of bring up the fact that is sort of the linchpin of the concepts of the book, is that Johnson sort of, in a very mystical and mysterious way, jumped into the ocean. So that's when we get to the spooky stuff. In late 2018, I started receiving junk mail to my apartment, to my unit, that was addressed to Ray Johnson. It wasn't just any old junk mail. It all had to do with preparing for the end of your life. It was notices for life insurance, burial insurance, and even an opportunity to reserve a cemetery plot. To this day, I can show you guys when I'm back on screen. I've only opened one of these letters. These letters do spook me because I truly, like, whenever I talk about this project, they said, how did you start receiving them? I truly do not know. Maybe it's a trick. Maybe the algorithm on the internet picked up that I was doing this Queen's Correspondence School and they just assumed, but I don't know. But to me, it was very clear that Ray Johnson was haunting me. So this is the first letter that was received. I came home and this letter was sort of placed on top of all of our mailboxes because someone in the unit had written "not here," knowing that Ray Johnson doesn't live at this apartment. But seeing this and being so struck by how heavy the concept of nothingness and voids and not dying Ray's work is, I was really struck by this as an object. So here on the side, I sort of try and play with some of the poetry that I've seen Ray Johnson use in his work. A big phrase that he would put on his collages was "not nothing," and then I add the final "not here." Right. So I continued to receive these and was not sure what to do about them. I looked into, on this card here, you must read about this burial insurance. I looked into maybe purchasing my own burial plot for Ray Johnson and putting the letters in it. I learned that purchasing a burial plot is very expensive. So that was maybe a project for another day. So as I said, I did open one, and this is what is on the inside. And some of these questions I think interested me with knowing through Diana, when we were in school together, she gracefully showed me some items in the estate as one of my practicum classes. And talking to her and learning more about the life of Ray, opening this made me feel a little sad that Ray Johnson died alone. And it's really great that he has this huge impact on people's lives, but I think there is a level of me feeling sad and wanting to honor him in a really important way. And so I'll just go on to this next page here. It also, opening it up, sort of really scared me to see this bureaucratic application that was just auto-generated, but with Ray Johnson's name and my apartment. So then the letter stopped coming. And then that made me sad too, because I was like, I liked having these sort of sporadic, surprising communications with Ray Johnson, and I was saving them and putting them in sort of Mylar sleeves and putting them in my little notebook. And I said, oh shit, how am I going to make this book? So that's when my sort of hybrid persona of an artist and an archivist came in handy. I think Diana mentioned earlier that a big thing in archives is getting rid of duplicate or items that are not important to researchers. So while I was processing the material in the archives, I would often find things in tear sheets that were going in the trash. But I saw them and I sort of had this inspiration of, why don't I fill out these business reply cards with Ray Johnson's name, in the hopes that I would get more mail sent to me with his name on it, and maybe then I could even trick the algorithm more and I would get more random mail. And so I filled them out. And on them, I sometimes make little cheeky references to him and his practice. So you can see here, I put his, on the left-hand side, I put his job as being the Joseph Cornell fan club. So I got a little excited picking out which ones I would choose. I would put a little drawing of his bunny on things. Sometimes I would even start making little collages. So we can see on the top right hand, and pop them in the mail. I didn't even really need to put a stamp. Maybe one or two required a stamp, but most of them I would just pull them out and throw them in the mail. Obviously, as I'd gotten them from the archive I was processing, they were 30 to 40 years old, some even 50 years old. And so I had no idea what was going to happen. So that's sort of the summer season. The next season of the book is what happened after. Being really interested in bookmaking, I think a really poignant thing that I considered in the book is this idea of chapters and shifts. And it was important to me to have this Black page really represent a big shift in the tone of the project. So we have a Black page with some of these quotes that came from the cards that the business reply cards that I had put in the mail. And again, this theme of rejection or negativity comes up again. But I think what was the most interesting to me when I was like, this needs to be a book, was the fact that I ended up making and collaborating on collages with the post office. So I sent them something. It was sent to whatever address, the Smithsonian Institute. It was sent back to the post office. The post office was probably confused, and why is this person sending me a 50-year-old business reply card, and stamped it with these beautiful little hands that say return to sender. Oops, sorry. These, if you can see my mouse, I really love these stamps, and I would love to be able to steal some of them one day. But then even, handwriting, the account closed years ago. I especially love in Sharpie on the left-hand page where someone wrote, the business reply permit is canceled, and they underlined it, and behind it someone said no such box number. So I love that these became their own collages and collaborations where, without even having to say please add to and return, just by nature of the fact that they had to go back to the return address. I appreciate that they didn't put it in the trash. I think that also interests me in its sort of ridiculous bureaucracy. So, as I think Erin mentioned about these envelopes that the Postal Service sends you when they damage something, I end on this collage because I like it so much. Their intervention, or their adding to and returning, to me also goes back and references Black Mountain College in Robert Rauschenberg's Erased de Kooning. So I sent them this little business reply card. They unknowingly sort of destroyed it, and then put it in this little envelope that says, we care. It's like, oh, okay, thank you. So then I saw that as sort of a rejection of becoming Ray Johnson. So the final chapter of the book is when I, as Diana explained, applied for an application for Ray Johnson's death certificate in order to establish myself as, this generational aspect of mail art. Again, I'm being a little silly. I sent this to the New York State Department of Health, thinking that maybe because Johnson died in Long Island, they would have the death certificate. I'm sure it would have been a little more meaningful to send it to the Michigan Department of Health. But I'm just playing. I want to see what happens. And so I, after researching some census records to find his date of birth and his father and mother's, I couldn't find his mother's name actually. I sent in this application. And so the final rejection of Ray Johnson is this very bureaucratic Department of Health automated record that has my real name, the Queen's Correspondence School, and the address, saying that you cannot apply for seeing this death certificate for another 50 years. So that's where I sort of end the book with this idea that maybe this project was my final way of killing the Buddha. And we have Diana's lovely essay, and then all of the image credits for the people that I collaborated with, and thanking the post office and Ray Johnson again. So that's that. I hope I didn't go too quickly. But yeah, if there are any Q's or A's, or Diana and Aaron, if you want to chat a little bit, I think that would be fun. Can you guys hear?
Yeah.
Cool.
Emily, that was great. We could see everything really clearly. Can you explain again just a little bit of the genesis of the name and when you decided to start using it?
It's called that because I live in Queens, but it's also called that because I'm a woman. And I think there's a very fun aspect of wordplay, because often when people ask what my work is like, I say, oh, I do mail art. And they're like, what? Mail? M-A-L-E? And I'm like, no, mail art. And they're like, oh. So I liked that play there.
Yeah.
Someone put in the chat after my little presentation, female, M-A-I-L. So yeah.
So some questions from the chat that I have on my end is, Diana, what was you linked all the links to the books in the chat, so you can see that there.
Yeah, and I think Johanna's putting it in the YouTube chat also. So
actually, so this is maybe a question for both of you guys, is how are copyright issues resolved when collaborative email, do you mean email or mail? I guess could be both. Artworks are exhibited, sold, reproduced, or published, as in books?
I loved that question. I saw it pop up and I resisted answering right away. I don't think about it, actually. I think that once you drop it in the mail, you're letting it go into the air, and I would be a fool to chase after my own copyright in some way from something that I sent without claiming it ahead of time. And that's the fun of it. And if someone actually came after me, I have several books and projects and things with collaborative work in it, and I just don't really want to have to deal with that in any way. I don't know. Maybe Diana knows if I'm completely naive in that way. But yeah, I just think once you put it in the mailbox, it's, good luck.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely the spirit of mail art, is like, why would you care about copyright? But I can give a little perspective of this issue, working for an artist estate, because there are a lot of things in the Ray Johnson Estate archive which were made by other people, or were touched by other people, or they were collaborations between Ray and other people. And a lot of times, we don't even know who those people were. It could have passed through, many, many hands before making its way back to Ray. But because Ray Johnson knew and collaborated with so many, I guess, big names in art history, sometimes it was a problem for us. I mean, the estate archive includes mail art pieces done by, for example, Chuck Close, or other big name people that Ray corresponded with, like Joseph Cornell or Jasper Johns. Yeah, I guess it can be tricky, but my perspective is that it shouldn't be. The philosophy should be exactly what Erin is saying, and because it's artwork. Yeah, I see that Erin Barson, one of our friends from library school, said in the chat, fair use. Absolutely, it falls under fair use in that context. And yeah, I just also want to say, like, a lot of artist estates are really tight-fisted with copyright and image permissions, and to me that really stifles creativity and art, and sharing and writing about art too. So yeah,
Can I
forget
add
copyright.
I wanted to add one more thing on top of that, which is that that ethos of mail art and of letting it go and not worrying about copyright has nothing to do with revenge or privacy. If there was anything that I knew someone didn't want public, I would never publish that. Like, I just want to be clear that it's not a frivolous carefreeness. It's a thoughtful carefreeness.
Mm-hmm. Someone wrote in the chat, ethical subversion. And yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned the ethics of it as well.
Yeah, I think most mail artists take that ethical subversion pretty carefully. They don't send dangerous things. They don't send offensive things. They don't send risky things. We just tiptoe up to the line.
Yeah, it's something that came up when we were all chatting before this event that Erin said that sort of made me think a lot, is how I was saying a lot of this book was, in a cheeky way, like me trying to get in trouble, but like not really. And so Erin, you mentioned that your students like sort of had this idea of like, oh, that's unethical, I can't do that. Maybe me trolling the post office a little is not 100% ethical, but as I said earlier, they got me back.
Yeah, so true.
So another question is, what do you think the connection is, if any, between haunting and rejection? I mean, I think there is a back, actually, maybe it's pretty obvious. I think there is an element, both in my interests and in Ray's work, about Buddhism, and how there is, I mean, especially the like US import of D.T. Suzuki's version of Buddhism that like sort of came, and I'm sure that Ray was reading during that like late 1970s version of like a more sort of woo-woo Buddhism, that he's drawn to that notness. So maybe that's what it is for me. I don't know. I'd be curious for someone unobjective to talk about it. But I think the haunting and the rejection is also sort of this idol complex that a lot of artists have when they look up to this artist as an idol. But I think maybe Erin said it a little earlier in the talk, is that you always want to end up killing, the father. And so that's why the last page of the book, that it was time to kill the Buddha.
I have another question, which is I was getting ready for this talk and I looked up the documentary, How to Draw a Bunny, which I think was probably really influential for many of us as we got the biggest sort of look or clearest look into his world. And it said that the original box office receipts were only $4,000. And I thought that was so amazing, because how could some movie that was so important to me, basically 20 people paid to go and see it? And I'm just wondering, maybe Diana, was the movie integral to the archive? Did they help with it? Because
Absolutely, yeah. The estate was very involved in creating the documentary.
Okay.
It was before my time at the estate, but
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, they were involved. And I mean, it is interesting. The movie is like Ray in that it's a cult favorite, quote unquote, which, basically means it brings to mind Grace Gluck's famous line about Ray Johnson, that he was the most famous unknown artist. He was connected with all these people who became more famous than him: Rauschenberg, Warhol, Jasper Johns. I mean, I could rattle off a million names, but it's interesting even now that he doesn't really have that mainstream respect. People don't really know him, and yet so many people have such a connection with Ray and his work. I mean, I'm not the only person with a Ray Johnson tattoo by a long shot, So yeah, I think that's really, really interesting that the documentary itself also kind of falls into that mode.
I did hear a friend told me that Ray is in the new hang at MoMA. Does anyone know if that's true?
I don't know if that's true, but I know that MoMA acquired a number of significant works out of the estate in recent years.
Someone's chiming in. Yes,
Yeah, that's Maria. She's the current archivist at the estate. So, hi, Maria.
That's got to be true. I have another question for Emily.
Sure.
Emily, what do you really think happened with the mail?
I truly have no idea.
Like, do you have a friend that loves you or hates you? That's clever enough?
Done that though. How do you get someone in a database to get like cemetery plot reservations?
Yeah.
No, if I knew, I mean, and that's honestly, I was just trying to get more and more stuff, and like I have not been, I mean, in a large way, this book is super interesting to me because it's about failure.
Yeah.
They kind of, I lie a little bit, like they trickled in a little bit when I say they stopped, but now they're totally stopped.
Done.
I mean, some people think that it's like, yeah.
Hi, Ray.
Some people think that like something in the algorithm just like tripped it, or I mean, most likely it is a friend, but maybe part of me making this book is also like, okay, tell me who did this.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the not knowing is like part of it, right? I mean, and also that's kind of what I was getting at when I was talking about this vast network and like how Johnson was kind of the nexus of it, but he also lives on, and the network lives on without him. As the archivist of his estate, like I'm not much of an artist myself. I'm not really a mail artist, but I started getting mail art from people, sometimes people I had met, sometimes not, and I was so quickly kind of adopted into this network and this like family because I was showing up at Johnson events and, corresponding with people about Johnson and being involved in Johnson projects. And yeah, I just became part of this. So, I mean, I think if you're out there, putting mail art into the world, and then you're calling your project the Queen's Correspondence School, which is, obviously a Ray Johnson reference, I could see, some mail artist just taking that and running with it. Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
again, I do really, I think if I ever found out who or how it was done, it would lose a lot of the magic to me. So I like not knowing. I like hate not knowing, and I like not knowing.
Yeah.
So the next question is, how can people participate in the Queen's Correspondence School? Well, you can write to either me or Ray Johnson. If you want to take a little screenshot. Hold that up for a second. And I'll write in chat where you can send me stuff. People ask if I feel weird about that. I don't think so. So follow-up question about copyright. What about using images made by other people used in collages? That's fair use. Collage is transformative, and as long as you use artwork, this is my archivist brain speaking, and Diana, you can come in and tell me, but as long as it's transformative, that is fair use. So, and last question, is anyone care to comment on inspiration for the randomness of creation involved in mail art versus other projects?
They went deep at the end.
The randomness of creation. Wow, what a phrase.
I would love to comment on that because I think of mail art as so collaborative, whether it's with the post office or whether it's actually putting something in and asking for them to alter it and send it back, or giving them that option. Oftentimes I will send something and say, keep it or alter it and do something with it. And I don't always like what they did, but you have to let that go because it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And that's the beauty of collaboration. I teach collaboration, just to put my teacher hat on for a moment. And it's hard for students because they have to give it up to the randomness of creation. And that randomness of creation might be their friend sitting right next to them. So it's a beautiful thing if you can learn to enjoy it.
One anecdote that makes me think of is having the show at Academic was wonderful. There were so many people because it was so collaborative. But there was one piece that a young lady submitted and was sent to another artist. And his contribution, I mean, to be objective, it was ugly, which is okay because like sometimes art can be ugly. But the young lady had submitted this like very innocently hand-drawn figure, and she came to the show and she hadn't seen what her collaborator had done until getting into the gallery, and I think I saw her start crying, and I felt really horrible about that. But that was, one out of 20 people coming to the show and being like, oh my God, this looks so different than when I started. This is awesome. I mean, one thing, I submitted something to an artist and they basically built, again, referencing Duchamp, he built like a mini version of that Duchamp piece that's at his museum in Philadelphia, where you look through the little holes. And I was just like, that's incredible. But you're right, you sort of, when you are collaborating, you need to sort of let go of a little bit of that ownership. Okay, any last questions, or should we start to wrap it up?
I think it's been great. Thank you, Emily.
No,
Thank you, Emily. The book is amazing. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
As we said,
it's available online, and printed matter is the sole retail outlet.
You can also buy it on my website, and I'll put that in the chat.
Buy two, one from printed matter and one from Emily.
All right. Well, thank you all who came. I'm relieved to be done with this. The baby's out of the womb. And yeah, I'll talk to some of you later, and maybe some of you will reach out to me. I'll also put my email in the chat.
Yeah, I know questions are extraordinarily difficult in Zoom. So if there's any questions, throw them in the chat or email any of us.
Awesome. Okay, I'm doing gallery view. It's nice to see everybody. Hello. Oh, my brother has a lovely picture of Bannon as his image. Great. So drawing runs in the family. Okay, bye everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna.
Yes, thank you so much.
We've got so many addresses in the chat.
No.
Better get busy. Hey, there's even a Ray Johnson icon.
Oh,
That's Maria from the estate.
Oh, perfect, of course. You can save the chat, right, to get all these addresses?
I've
Yeah.
saved the chat and I'm going to end the meeting.
Thank
okay,
you.
thank you.
Okay, bye.